Today we're starting with our first podcast, and so we're really talking about beginnings of something that we are excited about and something that we also feel incredibly terrified about. So beginnings come with different feelings, and I think we're talking about all of that today as well. The practicalities of it, as well as what it feels like. My name is Liska Muller. I am a business coach and I run a coaching business in South Africa, but I coach people and businesses all over the world.
My name is Caroline Swart. I am a physio practice owner and I own a company called Surge Systems where we do business technologies for businesses. And I'm also based in South Africa.
So, Caroline, tell me about what you are busy with. What are you doing? Why are you here?
So, I am in the middle of a startup. So it's an exciting time and it's pretty appropriate for a chat today. So I'm feeling all the feelings that come with something new, something difficult, and it's new in many ways. It's new in that it's out of my comfort zone, which is, it's been healthcare. So this is really, it's a new industry. I'm dealing with people that are untrained in this so we're dealing with AI tools. It's new to the whole world. So there's lots of figuring out and there's lots of playing around and trying to make things as optimized as possible. So it's a proper new startup for me, even though I've had businesses for 10 years. So it's been exciting. It's been, the normal feelings of a little bit of doubt, some fear, there's expense involved. So you're like, am I going to get my money back for this? So all the feelings that everybody has when they're starting something new.
So I was wondering about what got you to a point of wanting to start something new? Why did you get to the place where you thought, actually, I want to do something different or I want to start something new?
Yeah, so I think the fact that it's always a good idea to have a variety of sources of income. So that was one of my concerns was to try and get different sources of income. And with this whole AI taking over the world, I just thought this is a really good opportunity. It's something, I'm on a same playing field like as everyone else. They don't really understand it, so I'm going to jump on this and figure this out. So I think if there hadn't been the whole AI thing, I'm not sure I would have taken this opportunity as quickly as I have, or at all, actually. Maybe I would have just stayed safely in my little healthcare system and just stayed with that. So yeah, I think it's just it's the AI industry that has really attracted me to doing something different and trying to figure out new things.
So I'm hearing you say that there's this need to diversify, manage risk. Your existing business was doing well, but, COVID came along, it did something to your business. You got to a place where you suddenly had to think, what do I need to do to make sure I manage risk of, I don't have multiple streams of income.
Yep.
I don't have enough products. I need to build other products.
Yes.
So that was the one reason for starting something new, is to kind of manage the risk of your current business not being sustainable or something happening that it would remove that income stream. But then you're also talking about how the sort of advent of AI has almost catalyzed this need to kind of get into the new world. So there's this whole new environment that's out there that if you don't do something, you're going to get left behind. And so you've jumped into that quite early and have been quite adventurous and I think taking quite big risks around that. And also I'm hearing you also talk about something that it's an area that you haven't been familiar with, but that you're really curious about. And I think starting something new comes with multiple different catalysts.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me more about your business that you first started, and how that came about.
Yeah. So let's unpack that, right? So I'm a physio, I've got a practice, and as a physical therapist, there's no more physical when you're in COVID, except for in the hospital. So my practice is hospital-based and outpatient-based. So I saw patients in the hospital, and then everything else just disappeared pretty much overnight as a practice owner. So then I decided I'm going to have to create myself an ascension model. So an ascension model of different offers to different people and different products, as you say. So I then decided, once we sort of got through the worst of COVID, I decided to open a different practice that wasn't so niche down in orthopedics, which is broken bones. So that allowed me to reach more people, get a larger referral base. So that was the first shift, the shift of realizing I don't have a proper business model in terms of different offers, different referral sources. So then I said, okay, I'm going to start that to cover those bases. So I went from that, and then I started doing a little bit of dipping into different things like the Sports Recovery Hub, and then opening a different practice just outside the city we're in, which is quite a competitive city in terms of the number of physios here. And so I'm branching out a bit with that just to cover those bases. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to also just do something completely different. Again, it's to do with the whole AI thing that's happening. So it was mainly in terms of systems, and in trying to scale a business, looking at the number of offers we had out there and our referral bases. So you can't grow a business without leads. So it all starts with leads, and if I'm just relying on 3 people for my leads, it's not a good place to be. So yeah, and so that's when I started thinking more about how businesses are structured, the sales process, so your leads management, your sales process, and all of that started to evolve. It's something I had absolutely no idea about. So I invested in lots of courses and communities, and just started to figure out how proper businesses run. So it's been a really big adventure.
So your first step was realizing that in your existing business you needed to increase the market space that you were operating in.
Yep.
So you needed to find more people to refer to your business, or more ways to get business in. So your leads process, your conversion process, then figuring out how to make those sales, and then opening up other locations, so scaling and putting systems in place. And then it sounds like you got involved in training or learning or developing yourself, and I'm curious about how that happened. And
so it was COVID again. It was like, so suddenly everything stopped, and for me personally it was a good time, because I was completely burnt out, working every weekend. I have 4 kids at home and a husband, and it was just far too much. So the break came at a good time, and then the online world suddenly opened up, and I started listening to people talking about businesses, and I was like, okay, I'm not this only person here in South Africa drowning in my own business, working in it as well as on it, and just having a complete nightmare. So that was the beginning of just hearing other people talk about their businesses, and then learning about business structures. I've invested heavily into my own personal development there, and then started to figure out, customer service within a physio practice. And so I have a thing that everyone's a VIP, like we treat everybody like VIPs, and it's the same now with Surge Systems. Like all our tech clients are VIPs, and we just try and service them to the best possibilities in the best possible way. And so we've started to, it's learning all those things. It's the same whether it's healthcare, tech, or coaching, or anything else. The same systems are there, and it was just a question of me having to learn about them, because I had a trade. And I think a lot of people who are trade people, they know their skill is like plumbing or being an electrician, and they know that, and then they have to try and figure out all the other stuff, staff management, and all those moving parts that come with business.
so what allowed you to get off the tools to start investing? Because both the investing in yourself and your own personal growth, because in order to reach new goals or build new markets or create new businesses, you have to be able to step away from the tools to learn something new before you start reaching those goals.
So the first thing was time. So COVID just put the brakes on it, and suddenly I had time. And the second thing is you've got to be curious, and you have to be invested in figuring it out. So I think it's hard, and I think when you are in it and feeling like you're drowning, to have the energy to put into figuring things out is probably one of the hardest things when you own your own business and you're in it. So it's freeing up 2-3 hours of your time in the week to just apply your mind and picking one thing and say, I will take action on that one thing, and then actually doing it, and then those little things will just stack up. So it's that 1%, just trying to get 1% better every time. Eventually, after a year, you're in a completely different space.
So I've worked with a number of different business owners, and my experience of working with you is that there's a natural drive inside of you to want to learn and grow, and so you actually make that time for yourself. Other people who I've worked with find it really difficult to get away from the tools and make the time. What do you think that's about?
It's to do with the energy and the importance. So it's probably pain points, like which pain is worse? Is your pain of drowning worse than the pain of making the effort to put time in? So, and for me, I was like, so listen, it's not, we're talking about me being up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. So there's enormous sacrifice or in terms of putting something extra into it. So it's not easy, and I'm not special. Everyone does it. Everyone gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning if they have to, because they've got something they need to do. So I think you've got to be willing to go the extra mile. So as I said, it's just a question of which pain is worse.
It kind of makes me think of, a mom with a small baby at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
It's kind of necessity that you feed the baby. And so in some ways, starting a business is like being a mom to this small child that needs a lot of attention. And I wonder what you think about that.
Well, that's pretty accurate. I mean, so my kids are now older, but I have been up at 3 o'clock in the morning for various reasons. It's either kids or work. And I think you kind of get trained. So with 4 kids, getting up in the middle of night, you kind of get used to it. And so I just went from having kids, managing the kids, getting up early to work on the business. So I think your analogy is spot on. I think, and it is my baby. These are my babies that you care deeply about, that you've invested so much into, and you want to, you want success, and you want your staff to be happy. So it is definitely like looking after a baby. Yeah.
You've come up with the brand, the products, what you're selling. How do you figure out what to do?
So it's taken a long while for me to figure it out. So I initially started with looking into doing a marketing agency with my daughter as a side hustle. She just wanted to do something while she was at university, and it was taking a long time to do everything. And so I thought, well, let me just see if there's any tools you can use to just make things go quicker. And then that's when I started spiraling into this world of AI. And then I was like, hold on a minute, but there are opportunities to grow actual businesses with AI, and not just one sector of just like marketing is a business that can benefit from AI. But this is like, I just realized this is a massive, massive market. And marketing isn't my passion, it's my daughter's. So I said to my daughter, you take care of the marketing, I'm going to go in this direction. And then we started looking into a platform called Make, and that's a very basic platform that uses AI to create systems, and you don't have to be a developer to use it or understand it. And so all these tools now are very, very accessible to people who don't have tech backgrounds. And that's when I was like, great, I can take this from this software, this from this, and create this entire new system. And so started with that, and then started to understand that for people, when I'm speaking to potential clients who need AI tools, they actually have to have proper business systems in place. And so I was like, hold on a minute. We're actually going too far too quick with AI stuff. We need the basics in place first. And that's when we decided to choose Zoho as a CRM platform that we would recommend to clients to just sort out their business systems. Just start with that. It's got AI tools within it. And then if you really want more advanced systems, then we can make that happen with AI stuff. So that's how Surge Systems emerged and was born.
How did you come up with Surge even? How did you come up with a name?
Yeah, so the marketing agency is Surge My Media. So then Surge is it was just a fun name that we thought, sort of encompasses the whole like growth and explosion of things happening, which is what can happen with AI tools.
I mean, you've decided now that you wanted to start a podcast, and
Yes.
today's our first conversation.
Yay!
And I'm wondering about why you thought that was an important part of the process.
So you and I were both at this virtual event with lots of big celebrities on, like Gary Vee and Daniel Priestley, and the message was so clear. You have to produce content, and it's free. It's free just to put your content out on platforms. So it's not my comfort zone yet. It's something I'm a little bit afraid of, and I've dabbled a bit with TikTok But I see people getting results, like ordinary people who are moms with 2 small kids at home who are just posting about, hey, this is how you could use Pinterest, and they're creating businesses out of it. And this is what I love. It's the fact that social media now is free to use, and it's allowing everybody to start businesses. And that's something that I feel anyone can start a business, and you don't need money up front. If you're using social media, you put as many offers out there, you figure out who your community is, you come up with an offer that's completely irresistible to your audience, and then you monetize it, and there you go.
Sounds very simple, but it's taken us quite a few steps to get this going even, equipment and lighting and...
Sure, but we've decided to make it, you can literally start in your car with your phone, and we've just decided to make it more of a professional setting. But you are also equally busy. Like, we have existing businesses. And so, again, it's that making time for something that we feel is important. Content is absolutely totally necessary nowadays.
It took quite a lot of convincing me to
Yes.
get involved in this.
Yes.
And for me, it's been quite something to consider putting myself out there. And I'm wondering how it feels for you around knowing that this content's going to be out there. And what does it bring up for you?
No, I'm excited. This is the whole point, is for us to build a community of people who are also have started their own businesses. And we're doing this because we are in a very small city in South Africa, but there are equally the same number of people in Australia, in South America, all over the world, just trying to create something that they've dreamed about, which is building their own businesses so they can have time and energy for their family. That's usually what motivates everybody to create their own businesses. And so I'm excited. So Liska, you're a business coach. And tell us about your journey. How did you start? When did you start? How did you evolve? Because I know that you had a previous profession before that.
So coaching has always been something that's been in my blood in some way. I think having played sports at school and in a sort of semi-professional way at school level, being coached and teaching others in some way, supporting others, wanting to be a high performer, experiencing good and bad coaching along the way, and figuring that out, and really enjoying that space of high performance, of being pushed, of wanting to win myself, wanting to be challenged, to figure out the sort of outer limits of my own potential capacity. And also, going through periods where I wasn't able to do that, and then needing some form of coaching or sometimes therapy or something that creates a space to help figure out what the resistances are, what are the things that get in my own way. So it's something that has always interested me, and then I studied psychology and got involved in the business world early on in my career with a business called British American Tobacco. I worked in strategy there, and one of their core philosophies around people management and development was coaching. And so I was introduced to coaching in a corporate setting very early on in my career, and did all the courses and did all the learning required, and then got involved in coaching circles, and I had a coach assigned to me when I was there. So coaching was almost built into my academic and career path right from the beginning. And then after my corporate sort of episode, should I call it, I started a family and was looking at ways of being able to be a mom and invest in my children and still maintain some sort of income stream or business of my own. And so I decided to leave the corporate world and start a consultancy, very, I think, naively in the beginning, wanting to try and get clients and figure out how to service them. And so I started off almost as a consultant rather than a coach, and then did a conversion and opened a psychotherapy practice, and then started incorporating coaching and the sort of more clinical psychology, psychotherapy, psychoanalytic thinking. And so over time, I think developed a little niche of my own, which is very much, I suppose, on the fence of organizational and clinical psychology. It's looking at bigger businesses and how they function, the identity of the business and how it works, as well as the individuals within the system and how they all work together, and then also working with individuals and couples and figuring out how they navigate life and what works and what doesn't work. And so coaching has almost been like a thread throughout my occupational life. And yeah, I've I suppose been involved in coaching at different levels, worked for bigger corporates, and then during COVID we also had a bit of a shake-up, I think, like most people, and decided to leave Cape Town. We'd lived there for 20 years and relocate to a smaller city for various reasons. I think one of them was looking for a slower life for this stage and looking for something different for our children, and moved to a smaller city and started thinking about, I suppose, the economy of that smaller city and why business was operating the way that it was, and really thinking about wanting to develop the economy and what would be the best tool to do that, and looked at what was already within my hands. And so started niching down to specifically business coaching and looking at founders and business owners who were either already running businesses effectively but were looking for something bigger, wanting to scale, or business owners who were really struggling and needing support and needing tools and needing a thinking space to get away from being in the business. So the coaching space now has become a way to work on the business as opposed to being in the business.
What's the difference between a consultant and a coach?
So I think traditionally consulting is something that's outsourced that doesn't currently exist in the business. So most business owners, should I say, are either specialists, and so they have a particular skill set, and when they realize that they need their businesses to grow, they will initially outsource some of that, or if it's not a core offering, it will remain outsourced, and so you would use a consultant to close that gap, in a sense. Okay. And so the consultant actually does the work for the business. So it's an outsourced service that functions as an auxiliary part of the business, but it provides a necessary service for the business. A coach operates quite differently because the point of coaching is to develop the person or the business to become more than what it is. So if we think about coaching in a sporting setting, if the coach does the push-ups, then the player doesn't get stronger. So the goal is to get the players or the team to get stronger and better at their game, and that's what facilitates them winning or their performance, as opposed to, you know, in a rugby game, in our South African context, if we had to outsource the guy who does the penalty, you know, the game doesn't allow for that to be the case. You don't just have a kicker sitting, if it's called a kicker, I don't even know, I'm not that good at rugby, but you know, you don't just have that person sitting on the side of the field waiting for that moment when they have to kick a try even. You know, you have to be ready in the moment. And so the goal of the coach in a business setting is to identify what game is this business playing and what are they actually trying to win at, and then does the team or the business owner have those capabilities, and then how do you facilitate the growth of that organism or that system so that it can win. So if you outsource it, the power and the knowledge then remains with that outsourced entity, as opposed to it slowly developing internally and that system becoming stronger at what it does. And so as a coach, that's kind of my passion, is to figure out what is the potential of this person or this business, and not because of that, that's what I want for them, and that's more a parental thing, but more of figuring out what does the business want for itself. And often business owners don't really know. They just come with I have this idea, or I have this itch, or I have this desire, but I can't quite name it. I can't quite figure out what that could look like. And so the coaching relationship offers a creative space to start asking those questions and figuring that out. Or, you know, a business will often come and say, we're struggling with something, but we don't know what it is. We're facing the same issue over and over and over, but we can't quite identify where the source of the problem is. Often it's, there's a squeaky wheel, and we fix the squeaky wheel, but it keeps squeaking again and again and again. How do we figure out what the problem is? And then we look at, actually the wheel alignment is the issue. So coaching is really a space to think and to process and figure out and digest what's going on, so that you can go back into your business and grow and solve problems in a more creative way.
Today we're talking about the beginnings of things and startups. What do you think, what advice, give me 3 to 5 things that you would give to someone who is in the process of figuring their new business out, whether it's like they've been going for a year, you know, just that fresh new start. What 3 to 5 things would you say to them? Say, you need to be looking at these areas specifically, or look at yourself in this way to try and get the most out of what they're putting into their business?
It's a good question, and my response is always, it depends on the person asking the question, because different people come from different points to starting something. And so that's where maybe my psychology jumps into this, because if you come to me and say, what are the 5 things I need to do? I would say, okay, I know this about you, Caroline. These are some of the things that you specifically are going to have to think about. So I don't really believe in giving a kind of recipe for something, because, I mean, there are certain fundamentals, but I think what's really important is that each person and each business has a different starting point, and it's really important to take that into consideration when we're defining a pathway forward. And without that, often the recipe works for a while, but then you reach a point where you have to take some steps back and figure out what isn't working.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think there are some businesses that start because of necessity, and so there's this kind of sort of hustle or scurry, or there's a sudden demand for something and you're able to meet it. And so it starts in the action space where you're already doing something and it's working, and suddenly demand increases and you have to figure out, okay, how do we ensure that delivery is consistent? How do we ensure that we can actually manage from whether you're creating something or servicing a business in a way, there's always a need to create a system or some form of structure. And so the obvious things are always, well, how do we manage our time, or how do we manage ourselves based on the time that we have available? So even in starting this, we're going, okay, Caroline, when do you have time? When do I have time? Let's put that in our diaries. Let's block that out. Let's make sure that we have everything set up and ready. So the putting structures in place to facilitate some sort of consistency is critical. I think that's one of the things that most people struggle with, is creating space for this new thing. So it's a bit, again, I'll use the baby analogy a lot, but when you're thinking about having a new baby, you create the nursery, you buy all the parts. So there's a need to create the space for this new thing, and that requires a certain structure. The other thing that requires attention in the beginning, I think, is probably looking at the financial aspects of it. So doing some sort of a business plan or business case for the idea, thinking about what is it going to cost, how many of these things do I have to do, where's the market, what is the potential for selling this thing, what is the competition. So all the aspects of figuring out, can this thing thrive, and what is it going to cost to keep it alive, what is it going to cost to clothe it and feed it and make it a viable thing. So looking at the financials, things like what would the break-even point be, what would the, when am I starting to be in profit, all those things are really important. And so making space and time to think about the financial fundamentals of the business is really important. The other aspect is in terms of delivery and the quality of something. So let's say I'm thinking of a shoe business and I want to sell shoes, and I want every shoe to look the same, every person who buys the shoe to have the same experience, so they can then refer and know that if they refer it, they're going to get the same experience. So something about the consistency of the delivery is really important. And I think having this, I probably should have said first, but it's interesting because this often only evolves over time, and maybe that's why I'm saying it as the fourth thing, is that having an idea of where you want it to go is really important. So having some sort of, vision, mission, blah, 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 but really just having a sense of a dream. Like there's something over there that I'm trying to reach and I'm wanting to move towards. I think that's really important. So often new businesses are born out of a place of a dream, a desire, something over there, even a fantasy, something I can't quite touch or see, but something bigger, something hopeful, something that draws you in that direction. So without that, I think it just ends up being something that keeps us busy. And it's interesting that the word business has a lot of busy in it. And without that sort of longer term goal or dream, it can just get stuck in the here and now. And so holding those two things in tension, the kind of how do we get stuff done, make it happen in the day-to-day, but also make sure it's going in a particular direction.
That's 4 things. So just to recap, is begin with the end in mind, create time and space for structures in your environment in order for you to do what you need to do. Know your numbers in business. Like when you start, you should know things like this break-even number. It's just a good place to start. Understand what's going in, what's going out. Start with the basics of knowing your numbers. And then the final thing is your delivery of service. So that's a great, your top 4 pieces of gold for a business owner who's just feeling like, I'm doing this, I'm not too sure what direction is. Start with those 4 things. The beginning with the end in mind is huge, and often people just start because they're starting frantically just to get somewhere. But I like those 4 tips. I think that's a really good place to start. So anybody who's struggling with figuring out what to do next, have a look at those 4 areas just to make sure that that's the basics covered, and then take it from there.
So you have an American accent.
Yeah.
Or something. I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah.
What's that about?
No, so I just grew up, I have a French father and a British mother, and we were in the States when I was young. So I spent 9 years in the States in a French schooling system. So my environment was always French speaking, and then we moved to the UK, again in a French school, and I just didn't lose my accents. The French teachers who spoke English generally learn American English also, so it was always reinforced. But if I spoke to an American person today, they'd think I'm not American. So they'd say, you from England. So it's a very soft American accent now. So that's where the accent comes from.
It's interesting. I think that gives you such a richness, though, in terms of your understanding of a global perspective on things. And I wonder, how that fits with you now living in South Africa. And
yeah, so this is one of the things I'm the most grateful about, is that in the French school in New York where we were, there were people from all nationalities who were French speaking. So all the African French speaking countries were there, as well as there were Canadians, and so it was such a nice mix. And for me, from really young age, we were just all like at school. This was school, this is normal. And then figuring each other's cultures out, it was just, nothing was hard. It was all easy. And different languages. Everyone was bilingual with a different language. And I think that's priceless in terms of, so I do think that coming to South Africa, living here, having to work in government hospitals, that was a huge advantage for me. And there are a lot of UK people who've come to South Africa, and I've met them, and they just don't make it. They're like, we're leaving, just because it's an adjustment. You have to adjust to different cultures and languages and ways of doing things, and you're either up for it or you're not, I think. So, yeah.
I guess that's similar to starting a business.
100%.
I mean, some people try it and find it incredibly challenging and find their way back into employment, because running a business really it's a very unique thing, and it takes, I don't know, I suppose a certain amount of resilience to be able to survive the hard knocks of running a business.
No, absolutely. You definitely have to be that type of person. And what's interesting to me also is, because growing up, the environment, the schooling environment was like, you're always going to have this job, and you're going to be in that job for 20 years. And so that has changed massively. Even the status of universities now, people are wondering if it's worth getting into that much debt and actually going through the process of getting that kind of education. I think there's a huge shift in society now anyway. My oldest is about to finish university, go into the working world. There's definitely a feeling of adventure, and let's just see what's out there. I'm going to test and measure, as opposed to pick a lane and stick at it for 20 years. So that's also the world is changing in many, many ways.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about having children that are going to university, and that kind of gives away your age. And I wonder about what it's been like to start something at this stage of your life.
Yes. So Gary V, who was at this BizX event that we were, he often says age has got nothing to do with it. And so I would watch these videos of him talking to people saying, you've got your whole life ahead of you. And I was like, well, actually, we do. And we do need to keep working until we're well into our 60s. So let's just make the most of it, actually. And why not create something that I'm willing to do for X amount of time, instead of having, the monotony of maybe doing the same thing under conditions that aren't suitable for my family and I. It's just being able to pick and choose. And I do think it takes a little bit of courage to say, okay, well, we've gone through all of this, and now, you know, it's like, do I really want to spend the amount of time and energy now at my age than I did when I was younger? And the answer is yes, for different reasons. And it's completely doable. So when we're talking on today, we're talking about the fact that anybody can start a business, and what it's like to start. It doesn't really matter how old you are whatsoever. I'm in communities where there are people who are 15 years older than I am, and they're starting something. And they've actually got a lot of wisdom and life experience. So they're bringing into this business like their mountain of value that they're coming in. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Like, why not? You know, you've got so much authority. You understand people so much better. So I would absolutely encourage people to start businesses. Age is really, it doesn't matter.
So you're also touching on something that I think a lot of people are sitting with, is how the world is changing, and also how you were describing working in conditions that weren't conducive to being available to your family. And, you know, I think there's a huge move to leave sort of corporate employment and start your own business. What would you say to people who are kind of navigating that transition?
Yeah, so I think the choice is often, do I sit in my job and start a side hustle and just figure it out? Or do I completely make that leap and completely leave? And I think everybody's motivation for that is different. And I think there's no right or wrong. You've got to do what works for you in terms of, this is my capacity. You know, you spoke about one of the top 4 things that people who are starting businesses should be looking at is time and structures. You've got to make it work for you. So, and that's the thing, is you can't be looking at someone saying, well, he's doing it this way, she's doing it that way, I'm gonna do what they're doing. It's actually, in order for it to really work and for you to have that motivation to keep going at 3 o'clock in the morning at the beginning, when you really need to get stuff done, no one is there to help you. Like, it has to be you. There is no one else who's going to do it for you. So you have to do what suits you.
Everybody's starting point comes from a different motivation. And so it really is about figuring that out for yourself. And really, you know, making the time and space to think about what works for you and what your needs are, what your reality demands of you as well. Yeah,
so, and I think I mean, courage is the right word I would use, because you've got to be willing to do something different at your expense. So a lot of people feel shame that they've started something and it hasn't worked out, and then they've got to go tell their partner or their friends or whatever. And so there's a lot of feelings that you are the expert at talking about, what people feel, where it comes from. And so all of those things, that's why it's messy. Starting something is messy and complicated, because we've got all of this happening. So yeah, it's very individual, but we all have common things about starting a business.
I think what you're describing about the messiness is really important, because I think for many of us who want to start businesses, we're resistant to the messiness. You know, we want the neat little, this step and then that step and then that step, and as long as I can control that, then I will do it. And then if I do it, I must do it right the first time, and then it will be okay.
Yeah.
But if we think about, again, developmentally, the process of growing up or becoming big at anything is messy. But there's also lots of trying and then not getting it right, and then having to do it over and over and over to get better at it.
Yeah.
And I think that's often the fear that prevents us from starting something, is that we know actually unconsciously that there's going to be mess in it, and we resist that mess. We don't want to have to walk through the weeds. We don't have to, you know, if we think about it in a building project, you'd have to, you know, excavate first. You'd have to get rid of, like, clear the plot. You'd have to get rid of the boulders that are in the way of where you want the foundation to be, and that's messy. Even if you're renovating, it's messy. You know, sometimes you have to live in the mess before the beauty, you know, gets revealed. And so I think starting businesses really requires a trust in the process of trying. It feels like failure, but it's actually learning, trying it again, repeating something over and over and getting better at it over time.
Yeah. So I would probably say that the things that you need are courage, being willing to be messy. We always talk about B plus is good enough. Like, yes, we want high standards and everybody wants an A plus, but when you've got things to do in terms of trying to test and measure, B plus is good enough, because you just need to see what's coming from what you're doing, and then action taking. A lot of people are sitting for hours and not actually sitting and taking the actions they need to in order to get to where they need to. And I think that also it's like this paralysis that people feel. They've got these great ideas and they just don't take action. So I think that's also one of the biggest things that I would say to somebody is have the courage, be sensible with your spending, make it, it's got to make sense, and then take action, and then measure, and start again. Rinse and repeat. Once you find something that works, just do it again, tweak it, get some feedback from your market.
I think taking action is such an important part of the process, but that paralysis is what a lot of business owners get stuck in, the sort of almost procrastination, and it's often because of a need for perfection, the need to get it right before we start. But it's actually in the doing that we get better at it. And so, and that process of getting comfortable with not getting it right is incredibly difficult for some people. I think you naturally are much more okay with trying something and it not working out, but a lot of business owners I work with really struggle with doing something because it's not going to be right the first time. And so that's a massive resistance to have to work through. And so I suppose that's where coaching is really useful, is to have to regularly come back to that wall and we chip away at it until there's a bit of a watershed, and then something new can come about.